All right, everybody, so welcome back to another episode of Colton Posey Fishing. Today we're going to be going over my top baits for January. Now, one of the things I want to say is I'm going over these baits. You may be thinking, well, why didn't he bring this bait up, or why didn't he bring that bait up? Well, that's probably because I talked about it last month or the month before or something like that. So if you hadn't checked out my December baits or November baits videos, make sure to check those out. All this stuff kind of correlates, but what the baits particularly that I'm going to be showing you today is baits that I've been catching fish off of over, you know, the course of December and then going into January. And I'm probably not going to put these baits down until probably late February. So either way, stay tuned. This is something you don't want to miss. So make sure you do all the cool kid stuff. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you do not like my baits, make sure to hit that thumbs down button. Also, if you have any questions about the baits on how to use them or anything like that, or you know, the areas or something like that, drop a comment down below. Love talking fishing with you guys. So the first bait I want to talk about is going to be a Ned rig. Okay, a Ned rig is just one of those very, very subtle baits. And in my opinion, it's very, very boring to use unless I'm getting bite after bite after bite. Now, one of the cool thing is with the Ned rig being around, you know, bluff walls or any kind of steep contours and stuff like that, letting this bait fall, a lot of times you're going to get a lot of bites, even out of one singular school with a lot of fish in it. But the subtle presentation and having like something like a 1/4 ounce, something that's going to give that slow fall, okay? I really, really want that slow fall because either one, they're going to hit that bait at the fall, or when you let that bait hit bottom and you're sitting there kind of shaking it just lightly. So the worm that I really, really like to use on my Ned rig heads is going to be that 3-inch Ned worm by Robo Worm. I like the Aaron's Magic color. It's a very, very natural color. You got that green, or the watermelon red, then you've got the blue, and then you got the brown. It's just everything matches up for natural. Mimic crawfish, any type of natural you know, bait that may be in your lake or your river system. But I'm taking this bait and I'm throwing it out there 99% of the time. I'm letting it fall to the bottom, and then I'm going to shake that bait, kind of pull it a little bit, and most of the time, as long as the wind's not blowing like it is here today, you're going to feel those fish bite it. I like going with an ultralight rod simply because 99% of the time they're going to bite that bait, and sometimes it will cause you to set the hook a little bit too early. Sometimes it's like they bump the bait and then they just sit there for a minute and then they'll hit it again and get it. So, you know, taking your time with that bait, you're going to catch a lot more fish, but it's just a great way to catch a ton of fish, big fish, small fish, whatever you like to do. As long as you like catching fish, throw the Ned rig. Now, the next one that I want to talk about is going to be that Damiki Vault. So any kind of blade bait is going to be great. I like the Damiki Vault just because it's small. It's super small, and 99% of the fisheries that I fish, these bass are feeding on threadfin shad. So anything that I can use to mimic those small threaded fin shad is typically going to work better. But the good thing with the blade bait is it's a tight vibration. There's not a whole lot of action to the bait or anything like that. You can jig it, you can reel it. You know, it's got multiple slot holes. If you go towards the front, it's going to lift the nose of that bait. If you go towards the back, then it's going to push the nose of that bait down as you're bringing that bait to you, make it run more, you know, kind of that rattle trap look vibe kind of deal. But, you know, either way, you can jig this bait, you can reel this bait. I like using this on schooling fish that are actively chasing shad. This bait right here just works perfect. Most of the time when they hit it very aggressively. So the next one, I talked about this last month, but I'm going to talk about it again because I can't stress to you enough how much this bait is important during January and February. That's going to be the tail spinners. Okay, tail spinners is just an amazing way to target fish that are chasing shad. You guys that live on spotted bass lakes and stuff like that, or fish a lot of spotted bass fisheries where those spots, you know, in that cooler water temps, they don't really slow down and getting as lethargic as largemouth do. They chase a lot. With the tail spinner, you're using a moving bait, but you're also able to bust up bait balls when those fish get in the ditches, or if they're just chasing shad out in the open, you need to get to a specific depth and keep that bait at that specific depth. Now, there's a couple different sizes I like to go with. We've got the 3/8 ounce, which is what I'm throwing right now. You can go to a 1/4 ounce, you can go to a 1/2 ounce. It all depends on your fishery and how deep you're gonna fish. Most of the time, these fish in my home lake, they don't really go any deeper than 30 foot. So, you know, that 3/8 ounce is kind of perfect. It's that soft medium to where I can get that bait down there pretty quickly, but I can also keep that bait right above their head, which is another key, while slowly reeling that bait. You know, if I go up to a 1/2 ounce or something like that, then I have to kind of speed that bait up. And this time of year, I really, really want that slow retrieve because we're dealing with 50-degree water temps. Early in the morning, it's even lower. But those are my 3 finesse baits. So let's talk about my power fishing baits, the baits that I really, really prefer to use during the winter. The first one's going to be some type of flat-sided crankbait. Now, this can vary day to day, okay? It really depends on the weather conditions and the mood of the fish. But the genre is kind of going to stay the same. Flat-sided crankbaits, okay? I want that tight wiggle, okay? You know, when those fish are positioned maybe, you know, 8 to 10 foot of water, something like that KVD flat side round bill is perfect, okay? Fishing riprap, around trees, lay down, stuff like that, it's just a perfect way to catch those fish and trigger a lot of reaction bites. But now let's say these fish move up on a flat, right? So let's say they push up on a flat and you're trying to, you know, target these fish. A lot of times, especially if you deal with like that moss that gets on the bottom of your lake and stuff that dies off this time of year from the grass, it gets all over your hooks and stuff, it can be really annoying. That's typically when I go to like the rattle trap or something. And typically this time of year, I like going with a 1/4 ounce. I either go with some type of 1/4 ounce like one knocker, or I typically go with one with a lot of rattles. It's just all personal preference, and sometimes I believe it makes a huge difference, but most of the time during the winter it doesn't really. If the water's clean and clear, a lot of times I'll go with a silent one. So, you know, just mess around with those a little bit. If you're on, you know, that 10 to 15 foot range and those fish are kind of lined up towards the bottom of these, you know, riprap walls or rock or anything like that, that KVD flat side is going to be perfect, or any type of flat side that you really like. But if they're pushed up on the flats, a flat area, something like a rattle trap is absolutely going to trigger a ton of bites. And I'm typically going to be just slow rolling this. This particular flat-sided crankbait, I'm going to slow reel this bait, get it down there, get it scrubbing bottom, and I'm just going to slow reel it. Anytime I bump into something, I may pause for like 3 to 5 seconds and let that bait float up. And a lot of times those fish will swim up to it, and as soon as it bumps, they'll stop. And when you stop, they stop and they sit there and they watch it. As soon as you go to slow crank that again, and that bait gets down there, they'll come behind it and grab it. But the rattle trap, I'm typically going to do something like a slow retrieve. Or if they maybe move off of the flats, like let's say they were up on a flat at a certain point and you're following those fish as they start to go off that flat, sometimes jigging a rattle trap this time of year is an absolute game changer for your day. So taking that rattle trap, casting it out there, letting it fall towards the bottom, picking it up, dropping it, picking it up, dropping it, a lot of times will trigger a ton of bites. All right, so the next one I want to talk about is going to be a chatterbait, okay? Chatterbaits are phenomenal during the winter. They're phenomenal during the spring. If you know what you're doing, they're phenomenal year-round. I've caught more fish this year off a chatterbait than I have any other year. It's one of my favorite techniques to use, period, because I can cover a lot of water and a lot of the bites are super aggressive. But a lot of people like to throw the jackhammer this time of year, and there's nothing wrong with that. You'll catch tons of fish like that, but I typically, personally, get more bites off of something like the Evo or something like that, something that swims more straight. And your trailer has a lot to do with it, okay? It's not that you can't get a jackhammer to swim straight. You obviously can by changing the trailer, but we're dealing with winter, clean, clear water. The turnover's done. The water's clean, clear. You can see, you know, 10, 15 foot down, further in some instances. I don't need heavy vibration, okay? I just need the fish to see the bait, and I need the bait to look natural. So I like going with something like the Evo or something like Bravalo Strutter Blade, I think that's what it's called. Something that's going to swim more straight, more streamlined, okay? Because I can slow this bait down a whole lot. And when I bump into stuff, I can pause that bait. Every now and again, I can kind of jig it. That's one of the things with a chatterbait that's really cool. Don't forget, it is a jig. It is a type of jig. It is a vibrating jig. A lot of times on these points and stuff, you can take and cast this bait out, let it fall, hit bottom, and pull that bait up like you're kind of pulling a jig up, okay? Let that bait vibrate, let it flutter down. And a lot of times, a fish will see that, they will pull to it, and as you pick that bait up and it goes to fall, they'll slam it as soon as it starts to go down. One of the trailers that I really like to use is that Yamamoto shad. It's just tight. It stays real tight, but any kind of fluke style trailer is going to be more predominant than a swim bait type trailer most of the time. If I'm dealing with muddy water for some reason, then I like going with the swim bait trailer. More vibrations, a lot easier for the fish to find the bait. I like keeping all my colors very natural. If fish are chasing shad, I go with my shad colors, especially if I can catch those fish. If I do not see or cannot find fish that are chasing shad, then I like going with those more natural colors like the robo worm that I showed you earlier today, or like this chatterbait right here. We've got the chartreuse, and then we've got the kind of bluegill pattern skirt on here, so it kind of mimics the bluegill very, very well. Now, you guys that's been on my channel for a while, you already know that I'm going to talk about this bait because I absolutely slay fish during the winter with this bait. It's one of those techniques where, you know, you could go one day and it just kind of be very, very slow with the jerk bait, and you know, you got to include that 10, 15, 20-second pause that is very annoying and very dull. It's kind of like watching paint dry, but when they bite it, they got it. But some days during these colder months, you can take this jerk bait and absolutely slay fish on areas like pinch points, like bridges that come to a close that these fish have to travel through to get backs up in creeks, back up in pockets, up on flats and things like that. You can take this bait and work it pretty quickly. You know, you can include, you know, like 6-second pauses or something like that, and a lot of times get a lot of strikes off of it. But this time of year, I like going with 2 different jerk baits. I like the KBD, and then I also, or the Strike King KBD series, and then I also like the Thunderhawk / crankbaits. Both have a very lazy, lethargic movement, and that's typically what I'm going to look for. I want something to look lazy and lethargic because we're dealing with cold water. We're dealing with 50 or below degree water temps. So something lethargic, something slow that looks very, very natural can trigger a lot of bites. Now, sunny, like we got some sunshine today, clear water, I like something chrome with, you know, some type of gold or some silver or something like that, something flashy that they can see from a distance. Now, a lot of times you'll notice, depending on your water clarity, that a lot of these fish and a lot of bait fish will kind of dull out. Their colors will start kind of dull, you know, they just kind of look a little dingy. When this happens, I like going to more of the translucent colors. So something like a pearl blue or something that, you know, you can kind of see through the bait, something that's not as shiny, not something that's not as loud, something a lot more natural, but making them able to see the bait from a long ways away is going to trigger a ton more bites. And you know, just mess around with it. Danny from over at Fish North Georgia, he talks about using a jerk bait, and he says that a lot of times he has luck reeling this bait. I've never had luck reeling the bait specifically, but I've never tried it day in and day out to see how well it works. So, you know, try multiple different things with the jerk bait. It is a wonderful tool this time of year that you can use up against bluff walls, up on flats, anywhere you want to. It's really just triggering that depth zone. So how I decide on what jerk bait I'm going to use is where I see these bait fish and where the bass are positioning. If I see the bass positioning at 20 foot, then I typically want a jerk bait to run somewhere around that 10 to 15 foot, depending on where I see the shad. So if I see the shad cruising 10 to 15 foot and I see the bass sitting 20 to 25 foot, then I know I need to get a jerk bait down to that level. You know, if they're stacked from like 15 to like 12 foot, then the shad. If the shad are stacked 15 to 12 foot, then I'm going to look for a jerk bait that I can get down to that 12 to 15 foot range, and I'm going to make those casts and keep that bait in that area longer, and that's going to naturally increase the strikes, and you're just going to catch a ton more fish off of it. Now, the very last one that I want to talk about is in that crankbait genre, okay? But this is a very, very dominant crankbait. It is year-round. You'll catch fish on it year-round, but it's very, very dominant during the winter just because it's known for going through rocks, which includes the name Spro Rock Crawler. But if you look at this bait, it looks like it's been drugged behind a truck, and that's basically because it pretty much has. I've caught fish off this bait year-round, but during the winter, it is very, very dominant, not only because it's got this wide, lazy wobble action, and it mimics crawfish, and it mimics bait fish, it mimics a lot of natural things, depending on what colors you use, but you're going to be fishing a lot of rocks this time of year. A lot of sunny banks to where, you know, those rocks pull and hold that heat in. These fish hang around those areas. Oxygen levels are great in those areas. These fish are just going to hang out there. There's bait fish, there's crappie, there's brim, there's bass, there's a little bit of everything on those banks. So you're naturally going to be fishing those rocky areas a lot more often. And when you're fishing those rocky areas a lot more often, you need something that's going to come through those rocks really easy, and I like using stuff that covers a lot of water and doesn't get hung up near as much, and that's going to be that Spro Rock Crawler. Bomber makes some good ones. Norman makes some good ones. You know, just whatever bait you feel comfortable, but I really like any type of bait that I can work around rocks, because I'm going to be around rocks most of the time this time of year, especially on into the spring when these fish go to transition for the spawn. And guys, those are my top baits, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it helps you. I know, you know, a lot of times January or December, January, February, even on into March, it can be very difficult, because you know, we're habit creatures, okay? We do things through habit, so we're used to catching these fish, all of a sudden romping, fast moving pace, blah blah, and then all of a sudden we've got to slow down, way down, and it can become very difficult. And I get a lot of messages from you guys asking me, you know, well, what am I doing wrong with this? What am I doing wrong with that? A lot of times it's just really slowing down. That's it. Just slow down a little more. Take your time. Pick apart areas, especially those transition zones. I got a video coming out next week. Make sure to check out that video. It's Sunday at 4 o'clock. Make sure to check that video out. I show you the exact areas that I'm fishing, and I'm pretty much going to target those areas on in March. So either way, guys, I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.